For years, I carried all of you. But tonight, it ends.
I run a grant consulting business out of my home. It doesn't sound flashy, but the work brings in a six-figure salary most years, and sometimes edges close to 7 when federal contracts hit. A decade ago, I launched my own firm, Meridian Grant Solutions, after getting fed up watching nonprofits drown in red tape. Turns out I've got a gift for turning plain-spoken needs into the polished jargon reviewers love. But since I do it in shorts and a t-shirt instead of tailored suits, since I don't drive a luxury car or schmooze at private clubs, the family has always seen me as some freeloader clinging to their daughter. So picture this. I'm wedged into one of those stiff antique chairs Patricia insists on keeping, cutting into overpriced beef while being serenaded by the usual family routine. Patricia, my mother-in-law, is bragging about another charity gala she's planning, name-dropping with every other sentence. Everett, her husband, sits back nursing his bourbon and nodding as though she's delivering wisdom from the mountaintop. Graham, the brother-in-law, is droning on about nothing at all but trying to sound important. And then there's Bree, sister-in-law, perched in a dress that probably costs more than my mortgage payment. Bree, as always, dominated the table, swirling her wine like she was born to it, turning every conversation into a monologue about herself. She was describing how diverse their family dinners are. Translation: how gracious they are for letting the so-called charity case sit among them. I stayed quiet, kept eating, because that's what years of practice had taught me. Don't stir things up. Just nod, let them feel superior, and remind yourself that keeping the peace matters more than defending your pride. At least that's the story I repeated in my head. Then Bree gave that dramatic little clink of her wine glass, the prelude to one of her witty lines. She fixed me with that familiar smirk and asked, "So Miles, what's it like being the most useless one here?" The words floated in the air like smoke. For a moment, nobody moved. Even the grandfather clock seemed to hold its breath. And then the laughter rolled in. Tessa's nervous giggle, Patricia's half-hidden chuckle behind a napkin, Everett's deep rumble, Graham snorting into his beer. Even Ken, who still owed me $15K after his real estate disaster, was laughing at my expense. But the thing about moments like that is time slows down, and you see everything clearly. All the masks drop, and what's left is the raw truth. What I saw was 8 years of veiled contempt, finally allowed to shine. Strangely enough, I wasn't angry. What I felt instead was absolute clarity, like standing in front of a door you'd been afraid to open, and suddenly realizing the handle was already in your hand. So I smiled. Not that fake smile I'd been wearing for years, but a real one. The kind you have when you realize you've been in a rigged game all along. I set down my fork, wiped my mouth with the napkin Patricia had always scolded me to use, and met Bree's eyes with a calm, steady look. "How does it feel?" I said, voice even, "knowing this useless one won't be paying your bills anymore?" The laughter stopped cold. Bree froze mid-sip, her wine glass hovering in the air. Silence filled the room, so sharp you could hear a pin drop on the Persian rug. And here's the thing about people like Bree. They see only what fits their picture. To them, I was just some guy who worked in pajamas, while their precious Tessa carried the weight. In their world, I was the deadbeat who married his way into the Charleston dynasty. What they never bothered to learn was what I actually did. Grant consulting might sound dull, but done right, it pays better than most of their flashiest years combined. From my home office overlooking the garden, I'd been quietly making more than all their social climbing ever produced. But since I wasn't parading a Rolex or glad-handing at galas, I was invisible. Worse than invisible, I was the object of their smug pity. Here's the reality they didn't know. For 8 years, I'd been underwriting their whole family. Bree's yoga studio was the first bailout. She burned through startup cash in 6 months. Kombucha and crystal workshops don't keep the lights on. By the time she was 3 weeks behind on rent, creditors were circling. Tessa came to me in tears, begging for help, so I cut a check. $15K for rent, another $10K for stock and ads. 25 grand gone in a blink. Bree never thanked me. She sent flowers to Tessa, praised her online, but to me at the table, I was just background noise. Then came Graham's DUI. He blew a .12 after a bachelor party. Faced jail, fines, lawyers. His teacher salary wouldn't cover it. His parents refused to drain retirement. Guess who got the call? I covered 12 grand in fees and penalties. Not even a thank you note. The biggest sting, though, was Patricia and Everett with their tax troubles. 3 different years. Everett's investments collapsed. leaving them scrambling to cover property taxes on the mansion they lorded over us in. Cue Patricia's teary calls to Tessa about the humiliation of losing the family home. I paid $8K once, then $12K, then $15K. Funny thing, nobody ever asked where the money actually came from. They just assumed their golden daughter had some mysterious account or family trust quietly covering everything. Easier for them to imagine money appearing out of thin air than admit the man they dismissed as a slacker was the one propping up their entire lifestyle. I kept meticulous records, every check, wire, receipt, and email. Digital copies, hard copies, sorted in binders by year and by family member. Not because I wanted ammunition, but because it's what professionals do. Track every outgoing dollar, document every transaction, keep the trail clean. But that night at the table, listening to their laughter echo off Bree's little useless joke, something inside me locked into place. 8 years of being treated like ballast while quietly keeping their fragile world standing, it all hit at once. So Monday morning, I opened my laptop and shut off the pipelines. $3,000 each month for Bree's studio rent, gone. $1,500 toward her insurance, gone. $2,000 for the so-called emergency fund that somehow was never enough, gone. $500 for the nephew's tuition account, gone. One by one, click, delete, terminate. 8 years of obligations erased with a few keystrokes. The effect was glorious silence. No pings, no teary phone calls, no crises requiring my wallet. For 3 whole days, the stream of other people's fires stopped reaching my doorstep. By Friday, reality came knocking. My phone buzzed at 10 a.m., probably her landlord or accountant, straight to voicemail. Then Bree herself, then texts, then strings of question marks. By noon, the screen lit up nonstop as she realized her rent had bounced. She worked through every excuse, except the obvious one. The messages escalated fast. Miles, honey, must be a bank error. Then, this is urgent. Call me now. Finally, Miles, what the hell are you doing? Call me back. At 2 p.m., Tessa called, her voice tight. Babe, what's happening? Bree's livid. Says her rent didn't clear. Somehow it's tied to one of our accounts. I smiled at that wording. One of our accounts, somehow. Like she didn't know I'd been covering her sister's bills for 4 years. I canceled the transfers, I told her, calm as if I were talking about a dry cleaning pickup. You what? I stopped financing ungrateful people. Let her handle it. A long pause, gears turning in Tessa's head. Miles, you can't be serious. She's family. She's your family. I've just been the ATM. Tessa actually laughed. Oh my God, you're being ridiculous. Look, I get your feelings were hurt at dinner, but this is overkill. Just call the bank and undo whatever you did. That laugh said it all. In her mind, this was just another flare-up that would fade, a temporary sulk before I quietly resumed paying. She didn't grasp that the ground had shifted. I'm not calling anyone. I'm not fixing anything. Bree asked what it felt like to be useless. Now she'll learn what happens when the so-called useless one stops being useful. But cutting the monthly support was only the start. The real revelation was still waiting, and Bree wouldn't be the only one to feel it. That evening, the front door slammed like a thunderclap. Tessa's heels rattled across the floorboards, sharp and furious. She stormed into my office, hair coming loose, black dress wrinkled, face flushed. We need to talk. I saved my grant draft and swiveled to face her. I just spent 2 hours calming Bree down. She's in tears, Miles. Actual tears. She thinks her world's collapsing, all because of this ridiculous stunt. Ridiculous stunt? I kept my voice even. Yes, cutting off her payments. She made a joke that stung, fine. But you don't torpedo her entire business over it. Her business collapses the moment I stop paying for it. That's not my failure. It's hers. You know what I mean. She depends on that money. Exactly. I walked to my filing cabinet, pulled a thick folder I'd kept for years. Maybe I'd always known this day would come. Maybe it was just my habit of documenting everything. Either way, it was ready. I laid the folder on my desk and opened it. Bank statements, transfer receipts, emails, photocopied checks, all tabbed by date and family member. Tessa's eyes widened. What is this? This, I said, sliding out the first document, is the $15,000 I gave Bree in September 2019 to keep her yoga studio from shutting down. And here's the email where she thanked you for the help. Not me, even though the money came from my account. One by one, I spread them like playing cards. Me solving problems, them thanking Tessa, everyone acting like cash fell from heaven. And these, I said, pulling out the thickest stack, are the records of every time I covered your parents' property taxes. 3 times. $35,000 total. Remember what your dad said last time? Thank God Tessa married into money. Her mouth opened and closed without sound. I didn't realize. You didn't realize what? That money doesn't conjure itself? That every time your family begged for help, just this once? It was my money patching the cracks? I thought, we're married. Our money is our money. I laughed, flat and humorless. Tessa, you bring in $42K a year. I cleared 6 figures last year. At what point did your money ever cover what they needed? She picked up a statement with trembling fingers. You've tracked all of this? I track everything. That's called financial responsibility, knowing where every dollar goes. Your family runs on fairy tales, but I live in reality. Then I walked to the safe, spun the dial, and pulled out a sealed envelope I'd been holding for 6 years. You remember 2018, when Bree's studio was circling the drain? You helped with the rent then. Not just rent. She was 2 weeks from total collapse, landlord ready to evict, utilities cut off, suppliers threatening repossession. It was a complete meltdown. I slid the envelope open and pulled out a document stamped with Morrison and Associates letterhead. She came to me one Tuesday night, sobbing so hard she could barely breathe, begging me to save her studio. Said she'd sign anything, agree to anything, if I could keep her dream alive. I handed the contract across the desk. Tessa's hands trembled as she took it. I watched her eyes skim the page, then freeze at the key paragraph, her face draining of color. Miles, she whispered. This says, in exchange for the $25,000 I advanced to rescue her business, plus another $15,000 in operating funds, Bree signed over 51% ownership of Sacred Space Yoga Studio to me. The paper slipped from her grip. You own her business? I'm the majority shareholder, which means I control every major decision. Staffing, leases, expansions, profit distribution. Nothing happens without me. But she's been running it like it's hers. I've let her handle daily operations, but legally, contractually, I hold 51%. That includes equipment, clients, branding, everything. I picked up the contract, flipped to the back. There was Bree's bold signature beside mine, notarized with witnesses. Valid. Binding. Forgotten by everyone except me. How could you not tell me? How could you not know? You were there at our kitchen table when she signed. I explained the terms out loud. I thought it was just a loan agreement, just paperwork. It was paperwork, very specific paperwork transferring majority ownership in exchange for money I put up. She read it. Her attorney reviewed it. She understood exactly what she signed. Her attorney? The one I hired because she couldn't afford representation. Morrison and Associates making sure it was all above board. Cost me another $3,000, but I didn't want any questions later. Tessa looked at me like I was someone she'd never met. You've hidden this for 6 years? I haven't hidden a thing. It's filed with the state, public record. Anyone who bothered to check could have found it. But Bree doesn't know. Of course she knows. She just chooses not to think about it. Easier to pretend she's a self-made business owner than admit she's been working under me all this time. I pulled out another sheet. And by the operating agreement, I'm entitled to 51% of all profits. I've never touched a cent, never asked, never demanded. She's been pocketing everything while I quietly owned the business. Why would you let that happen? Because family was supposed to come first, because helping was supposed to mean something. But apparently that rule only ever applied to me. Sunday's dinner loomed, and for once, I didn't dread it. Not because I expected it to be pleasant, but because I knew it would be the last time I played the family scapegoat. I dressed in my usual clean jeans and button-down, the same outfit they'd sneered at for years. But this time, I carried a leather bag with the documents that would flip the entire narrative. The drive was silent. Tessa stared out the window. I kept my eyes on the road. We both knew the storm ahead. Patricia opened the door with her trademark smile edged in frost. Miles, dear, so glad you came. I trust you're feeling better after last week's little misunderstanding. Little misunderstanding. Sure. Inside, the scene was staged as always. Everett lounging with bourbon, Patricia perched elegantly, Graham hiding in the corner, and Bree upright and fuming like a furnace. She pounced immediately. All right, Miles, what's your problem? Do you realize what you've put me through? My rent bounced, insurance lapsed, landlords threatening the lease. All because you decided to throw some tantrum. I set my bag down, looked around at the faces that had fed off me for years while pretending I didn't matter. My problem, Bree, is being treated like garbage by people I've been carrying. Carrying? She barked out a bitter laugh. Miles, please. You pitch in sometimes, but let's not rewrite history. I built my business. Did you? I opened the bag, slid the folder free. Because the paperwork here tells another story. I handed the equity transfer agreement to Everett. He adjusted his glasses, scanned it, and I saw his expression collapse as the truth landed. This can't be real, he muttered. It's very real. Witnessed, notarized, filed with the state. For the past 6 years, your daughter's been running my business. Bree snatched the papers from his hand. This is BS. You tricked me. I was desperate. I didn't know what I was signing. You had a lawyer. I paid for your lawyer. Morrison and Associates walked you through every clause. Patricia blinked between us like trying to solve a riddle. But, Miles, dear, why didn't you ever bring this up? Because I tried to be decent. Tried to let Bree have her pride while I stayed in the background. But staying quiet just made it easier for everyone to erase me. Everett surged to his feet, trying to command the room. Now see here, son, I don't know what kind of game this is, but you're tearing this family apart. No, Everett, I said evenly, I'm not tearing anything apart. I'm the one who's been holding it together. I pulled a stack of papers from my bag, bank records, canceled checks, transfer receipts, 8 years' worth of proof showing exactly who had been keeping this family afloat. Graham's DUI defense, your property tax bailouts, Bree's endless loans, even the nephew's tuition fund. Every dollar's right here, showing who actually carried this family while you acted like I was dead weight. I spread the documents across Patricia's polished coffee table like a winning hand. 47,000 to Bree, 12 to Graham, 35 to you two, nearly $100,000 of my money covering your failures. The room went silent. The only sound was the clock ticking in the corner. I want an apology, and I want acknowledgement of what I've done. Bree stared at the contract like it might burn her fingers. I want my studio back. Then buy me out. 51% at current valuation, plus the $40,000 I invested, plus 6 years of interest. Call it $120,000. Her face drained of color. I don't have that kind of money. Then it looks like you're working for me. The room erupted, shouting, accusations, everyone talking over each other. I sat still, calm, watching 8 years of bitterness finally boil over. A week later, the doorbell rang. Process server. Bree had found a lawyer, filing suit that I exploited her distress and took advantage of desperation. I called Sandra Wu, the attorney I'd trusted before. She flipped it through the file, chuckled. Miles, I've been practicing 15 years. This doesn't crack the top 50 dumbest lawsuits. The case was open and shut. The judge reviewed the contract, the evidence, the fact she'd had independent counsel, and the 6 years of hands-off ownership. Miss Reed, the judge said, looking straight at Bree, you signed these terms with legal guidance, benefited under them for years, and operated freely. There is no fraud, coercion, or misconduct here. Bree crumbled when the ruling came down. Not in grief, pure rage at facing consequences. 3 weeks later, Tessa was gone. She packed while I was at a meeting, left the keys on the counter, and vanished without a word. No apology, no goodbye, just gone into the life she thought she deserved. 4 months later, I'm on my back porch with coffee and a watercolor palette, watching morning light through the live oaks. Thursdays don't mean deadlines anymore. Just another day living the life I want. I paint now, mostly watercolors, sometimes acrylics when I feel daring. Just finished a series of Charleston street scenes, shadows falling across old brick, sunlight catching the corners of buildings that have stood longer than most families last. Bree's studio still exists, barely. Turns out when you actually pay your own bills, running a business feels different. I've never enforced my rights, never claimed profits, never interfered. I'm letting her taste what independence really costs. I cook real meals again. Tonight it's shrimp and grits, the way my grandmother taught me when I was 12. Honest food, simple, no pretense. Every now and then I think about dating. There's a woman at the coffee shop downtown, paint stains on her fingers, always with a book in hand instead of a phone. We've talked about art, Charleston, and how conversations with strangers sometimes mean the most. Maybe something comes of it, maybe not. For the first time in years, I'm okay not knowing. Here's what I've learned. When someone calls you useless, what they really mean is you've been useful to them for too long. That's your sign to walk away. to find out who you are without their weight on your shoulders. My father used to say real men don't boast, they build. And I built plenty. A business, a reputation, even a life that carried Tessa's entire family. But I also built myself a cage of their expectations. Sometimes someone hands you the perfect moment to speak the truth. Sometimes, when you finally stop being useful to people who never valued you, you discover freedom. I'm lighter now. Free. And I wouldn't trade this piece for anything. Update. Few people asked about legal stuff. Yes, contract is ironclad. Yes, I really do own majority stake. My lawyer called it most clear-cut case she'd seen in 15 years. Sometimes being boring guy who documents everything pays off. Those saying I should have communicated better. I tried for 8 years. Every time I brought up feeling unappreciated, Tessa said, "That's just how families tease each other. Hard to communicate with people who think you're joke. Living well really is best revenge."